morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is July 23rd. I'm on Zoom here with Ian Bliss. He's the CEO of Northern Shield Resources. Northern Shield's symbol is NRN on Vancouver, and I think it's NSHRF. Is that right? On the
yes,
things in the U.S.
Yeah.
Northern Shield is, as any of you who get the newsletter are obviously aware, has been exploring a couple of years now on the Shot Rock property in Nova Scotia, where they discovered the first verified epithermal system in the province. No one had ever looked for this stuff there before, or at least they'd never found it. Ian and his team did find it at Shot Rock. They delivered a discovery hole a couple of months ago, and they're drilling again. And they put out a very interesting release this morning. They're pretty early in the drill program, so they don't have assays yet. But they did put out a map of the first 3 holes that they've drilled, and descriptions and photos that include some really, really impressive looking core. It looks like they might really be onto something here. So I asked Ian to just jump on Zoom and walk us through and tell us what they found and what the significance is. So why don't you take it away from here, Ian?
Great. Thanks very much, Eric. And thank you for having me on this morning to share this very exciting news. I'm not going to backtrack too much on the detail of the Shot Rock property on the whole, but we'll just zoom right into sort of where we're working right now. These are the really what we call the 4 fluid cells, epithermal systems, of which all drilling to date and much of the work has been on an area we call the highway zone. And so we'll just jump in and take a little closer look at why we're drilling there and the drill holes to date. So again, the real focus, these 2 stars represent the high-grade mineralization we hit in the hole 4 from the first phase of drilling completed in March of this year, located along a structure trending more or less east-southeast. And we believe we've interpreted 4 or 5 other structures in that area with a similar trend, as well as some other cross-cutting features that we believe of importance. So the idea of this drill program was to sort of drill underneath where we hit in hole number 4, test these other structures, as well as this area of magnetic degradation, which we now know the alteration surrounding these veins degrades or reduces the magnetic signature of the host rock, especially these gabbros. And so if we look at a little bit more detail, let's say again, this is now a vertical derivative of magnetic signature draped over topography in the background. All the holes right now in the fine black lines are the ones from the first phase. So I'll really sort of concentrate on hole number 4. As I say, that's where the mineralization was hit on either side of this dike in the first phase of drilling. And the first drill hole of this program, hole number 9, was targeting a zone of outcrop down here that on surface had fairly extensive mineralization, up to 1 gram, but over a fairly wide area. We drilled that in the first phase. We thought we were underneath it. Hole number 9 came in from the top and still nothing of interest. So we'll have to go back and do a little more head scratching on the trend of this zone. But then we started coming back up the hill and started first of all targeting underneath hole number 4. And we did hit 2 or 3 zones of stockwork mineralization over sort of 2 to 4 meters in each of these zones with classic epithermal banded coliform crustiform veins that you see in this picture to the right. Say very beautiful textures. And one of those zones was basically the targeted depth of this fault zone from hole number 4. So again, you know, those samples are being sent to the lab right now. But we did hit stockwork veining at the depth that we were projected to hit, about 75 meters to 100 meters below the intersection of hole number 4. The hole we're on right now is hole number 11. So this one is drilled at an azimuth of 200 degrees. We just swung around a little bit more, an azimuth about 150, with the idea of testing these structures in here, this east-northeast trending structure, and of course the same structure, this east-southeast trending structure that hole number 4 sits on. And the real target, the main target, was down in here, where you can see again there's a drop off in the magnetic signature, which corresponds to the fault zone. So we think this is a magnetic degradation associated with the alteration and veining. But interesting, we did hit at a downhole depth of about 160 to 170 meters. This very large quartz vein that we announced this morning, or a composite quartz vein di Breccia. And again, you can see it sort of sits, and there's a slight degradation in the magnetic signature of this dike. So this this concept that we have of the alteration degrading the magnetic signature, it seems to be working, and that's what we're going to continue to target throughout this drill program. And again, one of the other neat things in this is you can see, I mean, in the first phase of drilling, we saw how quickly the gold grades transition from, sort of 0.1 gram per ton on the surface to 22 gram per ton only 100 meters down. That's fairly typical of these epithermal systems where you can get that transition happening very, very quickly in a vertical profile. But what we're seeing now is obviously a very quick blowout in the dimensions of some of these quartz veins. I mean, hole number 10 is only about 75 meters away, but we see nothing of the size that we see in hole number 11. So again, not only gold grades can increase very drastically and quickly, so do the size of the vein. And again, here's a photograph of the vein that excited us so much in hole number 11. Is basically sort of an 8 to 9 meter vein. There's stockwork on either side, both above it and below it, but there's a composite vein of a lot of brecciation. In fact, the geologist logged in this core told me last night that she believes at least 5 phases of veining and brecciation in there, so a very complex system, which is good. But this is exactly what you want to see, a wide quartz vein system, heavily brecciated, and with all the right minerals associated with it, including, you can see in here, this is a zoom up of some of the drill core. That's orangey pink mineral we believe is adularia, often associated with gold and epithermal systems. You can see how this banding in here has always been brecciated up, and so later phases of gold are coming in along these fractures. And so every phase of veining or brecciation just allows more opportunity for gold to be introduced and constantly upgrading the gold content of the quartz veins. Again, a few other samples. I won't dwell on these too long, but these are pretty spectacular looking rocks and exactly what you want to see in an epithermal system. You don't often get pristine or banded veins that are not brecciated. You do in some of the younger deposits, typically in Japan, but the more sort of messed up they are, the more complicated they are, it's actually a better chance of higher grade mineralization.
One thing I think is worth noting too is that there's always this craze about VG, about visible gold, which is something that personally always makes me nervous because I find people overreact to it a lot of the time. But it's important to note that a lot of these epithermal systems, if you look at a lot of the epithermal and sort of transitional epithermal stuff in Nevada, for instance, there are deposits in that part of the world where you've got millions of ounces of high grade and no one's ever seen a speck of visible gold. A lot of these systems have extremely fine gold. So I'm not reading anything into one way or the other. I'm away for the assays guy, but this definitely looks like the right stuff. And I wouldn't be head scratching too much about there not being visible gold, because a lot of these epithermal systems just don't have it, regardless of the grade.
No, that's correct. And what it is, it's usually in the form of an electrum, which the coloring of electrum can sometimes be confused with other minerals. But most of the time, as you say, it's just too fine grained. As you mentioned, the Colorado Nevada classic example. I have a piece of Midas mine and on my desk at the office that's running 3 ounces per ton, and you just can't see any gold whatsoever. And even the silver mineralization is extremely fine grained, but even under a microscope, it's difficult to see. But in these rocks, again, you can see beautifully coliform, cruciform banded, and all these little specks along here are sulfides, and hopefully that's where the gold is also being deposited in the form of electrum. So again, the hole number 11 intersected this large quartz vein right in here, and then this is a 100 meter depth slice of the magnetic signature. So we're modeling the magnetic signature and dropping down to various levels. And I say what we're targeting really in hole number 11 was this pocket of, again, magnetic degradation down in here. But you can see all the way along here, there's little pockets of magnetic degradation. And so clearly targeting that seems to be working. So, the follow-up drilling as we continue on, we'll refine our drilling to test these structures, but particularly focus on some of these pockets of
one thing I'm curious about, Ian, the target at the end of your hole 11 there, on the earlier map where you had the mag draped over the topography, there was clearly a creek there. Do you know if the prospector or the geos have been up and down that creek? I mean, it looks like a creek.
Yeah, I know it is a creek. We've been up and down this creek, and there's absolutely no bedrock whatsoever. There's a lot of boulders. Again, this is where we're finding a lot of big boulders that ultimately led us to the discovery of mineralization on Highway Hill. But once you get off the flanks of these ridges, everything is covered because, of course, all the soil and material just sloughs off the side of the valley and fills in the bottom. So we've seen absolutely no outcrop once you get down into the bottom of this valley. But on the sides of the ridges up in here you do, but it quickly disappears down in here. But lots of boulders, all anomalous in gold.
Okay.
So again, targeting these magnetic lows, this is one of the focuses we'll get to later on in the drill program. This is at a deeper level and a very large one. So we probably still have pockets here, but as you drop down, you lose resolutions and you won't see the smaller events, just the larger ones. So, this is one we're quite keen on as the structure and the magnetic low coincides, as well as this one just to the east here, which sort of links up Crystal here uphill, where we have some gold mineralization on the top of the ridge. That looks very similar to what we're finding on top of the highway zone as well. So we'll begin to follow some of these structures out where they link up with this pocket of magnetic degradation. Just we have some work ongoing research ongoing at St. Mary's University in Halifax, really looking at some of the drill core from the first phase of drilling under thin sections. I won't get into too much detail, but one of the things they're beginning to notice is that perhaps some of the gold that we see in hole number 4 is actually remobilized, and that would explain the change in silver to gold ratio that we see from some of the veins we have on surface, where there's a very high silver to gold ratio, whereas in this drill hole number 4, it dropped off to about 1-to-1 silver to gold. So there's other indications in it that suggest this gold may be remobilized. Now that's nothing to be scared of. It simply means the gold's been moved around the vein. In this case, sometimes it's been moved out of the vein into the country rock. But again, that could still have the effect that it's upgrading the gold. So we might have multiple, again, sort of characters of gold zones. So you will eventually have it in the veins. We know we have it in the veins from surface work. But now we're starting to see it associated with disseminated sulfides in some of the country rock. And again, you can see some of these pictures where they're actually seeing electrum. So this is a gold silver alloy, usually hosted in or very near to pyrite. Chalcopyrite, copper sulfide, is also quite commonly seen in this, which is a little bit unusual because if you look at some epithermal systems, people start worrying if you get too much copper because that's telling you're getting too deep in the system. And then the gold's dropping out and you're starting to pick up your base metals. That's not what's happening here. This is remobilization. And certainly chalcopyrite, we're told, is going to be a very good indicator of gold potential in the remobilized gold ore. Here's another image, same thing. Electrum sitting within pyrite, extremely fine grain. This is why you're probably not going to see it. Again, associated with chalcopyrite, pyrite, a little bit of calcite, and quite commonly adularia, and that's very important. This is a mineral that's often associated with gold in epithermal systems and a very good indicator, along with a mica we call fengite. So it's beginning to follow some of the classic epithermal mineralogy.
Well, one thing I liked about that, the first petrography slide you put up there, is there seemed to be a number of electrum. Yeah, you can see a bunch of electrum circle there. It's kind of in the ground mass. It's not surrounded by other stuff, which, I mean, this doesn't guarantee anything. I'm pulling this out of my behind, but generally speaking, that's a good sign when it comes to doing metallurgy down the road. It looks like some of that's free. The other thing I'd note too, if you're not used to looking at petrography or understanding how petrographers do their work, one of the things they do is subject these thin sections to scanning electron microscope. Obviously, good petrographers can pick out most of this stuff just by looking at it. They're so knowledgeable about the geometry of these things. But when you see these notes about electrum and electrum's a gold silver amalgam, it's not, the petrographer isn't guessing. They've done scanning electron microscopes, so they're not guessing it's gold and silver. They know it's gold and silver because that's one of the things the scanning electron microscope does, is give you a specific element content.
That's correct. And again, depending on the ratio of the silver to the gold, I mean, obviously you're going to change the color of these things. So even if you get a large grain that's visible to the naked eye, it doesn't always stand out, obviously, as gold. And so, of course, in the field, you've got to be much more careful. But most of this, obviously, is clearly way too small to be seen by the naked eye.
Right.
Again, one of the classic things, this is the typical model we often see of low sulfidation epithermal systems, where you have a lot of stockwork at the top leading into your bigger veins, where typically you get your higher grade. And just two things, several things to remember that's quite important. These things are never as simple as it looks right here. So, you know, you think, okay, we're getting stockwork, you just drill deeper and you're going to get the high grade. But number one, these high grade pockets may be very depth limited, so they may start quickly, let's say at 100 meters depth, and by 200 meters depth or 300 they disappear, so it's easy to go underneath them. But you know, you're also looking at 3 dimensions and the interaction of various different structural events. So you know, the simple model is exactly that simple, but in real life they're much more complicated. And just as an example, I'll show you 2 or 3 examples of slightly modified epithermal models. Here's one from Japan. You can see the stockwork on this case is really sort of shifted off to one side. It links up to the main veins, but if he's typically finding the stockwork here and you drill right underneath it, which is a classic model, you'll miss something. But this one's deviated a little bit to the side, probably based on some structure. So again, it's a slight modification, but enough to make you, you know, missing a few drill holes if you're unaware of this, which you're probably going to be when you first start. Another example, Golden Cross from New Zealand. Again, here you have your main vein system and a ton of stockwork, which is all carrying gold and mineable, in this case by open pit. But you can see this case, of course, the gold probably came from the same system, but it's totally disconnected from the main vein system. If you actually follow the general trend of these stockwork veinings, you would end up over here, where again, that's not where the main vein system is. And so this one, again, you know, you could get sucked into drilling right underneath it, but the main vein system, Golden Cross, again, is offset from the stockwork, which clearly at Shot Rock, we seem to have a lot of stockwork veining. And this is one example, Mule Canyon in Nevada, that may actually be quite representative of what we have at Shot Rock. Because Mule Canyon, again, it's a little bit of an oddball in that the mineralization is following the flanks of a gabbro dike, of a mafic dike. And that's, you know, clearly what we see at Shot Rock is there is some association of the gold mineralization to these dikes. And it may just be that the gold bearing and quartz fluids are following the same weakness as the dikes, which is quite likely. But again, that's not the classic model, but there are examples around the world. And one is Mule Canyon. And that's interesting too, because you have both, you know, banded veins, your classic coliform, crustiform banded veins in Mule Canyon, as well as a bunch of disseminated mineralization. And that's perhaps what we're seeing in this sort of remobilized gold mineralization, where you're getting it associated with disseminated sulfides in some of the surrounding sediments, and that's, you know, very similar to what we're seeing at Mule Canyon. So this could apply quite well to what we have at Shot Rock.
So the mineralization event in this case, it's younger than the dike, and it's basically just following the margins of it. Like the dike is older than the gold mineralization.
Yeah, that is correct. And certainly at Shot Rock, you know, it's because we see the intense alteration of the gabbros. Clearly, they were pre-mineralization. Now, there is at least one phase at Shot Rock that is post-mineralization, and it stands out just by, number one, its overall freshness and appearance, but also it's a very strong magnetic signature, which we see in the geophysics, and we can see on, you know, measuring on the core. And that, because we now know there's a later event, that may be the dike that's responsible for remobilizing some of that mineralization. So even though we're seeing remobilization, that may not be widespread over the whole highway zone. That may be occurring just very locally to that one late phase of dike, but it could suggest why we have some remobilization at Shot Rock.
And you know, assuming that this association continues, I mean, it seems to keep coming up with your mapping and your drilling. Are there any implications in terms of sort of broader exploration of being able to, because, you know, I think a lot of methods like airborne would be hard to see the actual epithermal systems, but these dikes stand out pretty obviously, right? I mean,
that's correct. I mean, the dikes, especially the younger phase, which seem to be essentially the same gabbro, just a little bit younger. They're very magnetic. So they stand out well on the airborne survey we flew over Shot Rock. We see several of these dike systems within that airborne survey area. The most densely packed area is directly over the highway hill where we have about 4 or 5 of these dikes based on the magnetic survey. But the whole reason we picked up this new property, which we announced a few weeks ago, about 150 kilometers west of Shot Rock, is that again on the regional magnetics, which is very coarse, so we don't have the resolution we have at Shot Rock, but you can pick out some magnetic anomalies, which looks like a large magnetic body of gabbro, we assume, trending east-west to the north of the property. And then again, it takes a little bit of imagination to see it on that resolution, but I can decipher what looks like, again, a magnetic target trending north-south, which would match the orientation of the dikes at Shot Rock. And on top of that magnetic signature, which suggests these dikes in the area, we have stream sediment samples collected by the government years ago that are slightly anomalous in nickel. I'm not suggesting we're looking for nickel sulfide there, but gabbroic rocks are typically slightly elevated in nickel. So I'm taking that indication of elevated nickel in the stream, that there are gabbroic bodies in that area. And so that's why we staked that new property to the west, as I began to have a look-alike to Shot Rock, not only on the anomalous, nickel and gold and other pathfinders in the stream sediment samples, but geophysics gave a hint that there were gabbros in that area.
And the other thing I'm curious about is, especially this latest drill hole, there's a lot of adularia, and adularia is a common accessory mineral with epithermal gold systems. I mean, you see it over and over again, especially with these low sulfidation things. The veins are quite often quartz and adularia. Was there much of that at surface, Ian, or is this something that's just come in more as you got the drill onto it?
We saw a little at surface, but not very much. But you see small amounts of it in some of the colorful crossover vein, but nothing like what we saw either in drilling in the first phase, like clearly hole number 4, in and around that mineralization. We see adularia. We see high potassium in the assays, and adularia is a potassium-rich mineral. But certainly we've never seen as much adularia as we've seen in this large vein that we press released this morning. So it's definitely, again, along with the size of the vein, the increasing adularia is telling us we're heading in the right direction. And certainly from the work at St. Mary's, there's a close link between the gold and the adularia, which, as you say, is quite common in epithermal systems.
Now, what's the you're continuing this hole because of this great looking zone that you hit was ironically not the zone you were aiming for. So the hole is still in progress, I guess. You're going to drill to what, 400, 450, something like that?
Yeah, we're going to drill to about about 400, 450 meters. So this morning we're about halfway down. I think we're around the 250 meter mark. So obviously, as you get deeper, it slows down a little bit, especially with a lot of the broken core as you go to the fault zones. But we hope to be down at that depth within a few days time to test this magnetic load down here. So.
And I assume you got lots of capacity with the rig. It sounded like you were just using a standard rig, and those are usually 800,000.
Yeah, it's just a standard rig, and we don't really, it has that, I believe it has that depth capacity, but at the moment, we don't need to go to that depth. At some point we will, but at the moment, just drilling what we have in the sort of 400 to 500 meter range is there's plenty of scope there. There's plenty of room already. We don't want to jump too deep at the moment. Even trying to, as I say, we see now how quickly things can change within 50 meters. You have stockwork a few centimeters wide, and then 50 meters over, you have a 9-meter vein. So you got to be careful about jumping around too much, both laterally and at depth. So eventually we'll get much deeper, but right now we just don't see the necessity to go super deep.
No, I realize that your chief geo, Christine Viancourt, and her team, every time they drill, they're constantly reinterpreting this, and that's been a sort of a process through the entire exploration history of this, and certainly through the drill program. And I know she doesn't like to get too far ahead of herself because she wants to keep sort of refining where she thinks the structures are and stuff as she drills. But I assume if you get some joy from the lab, you're probably going to be, I assume you're going to be looking at expanding the program at least a little bit before you kind of sit back and think about things some more.
Yeah, if we get some good grades back before the end of the plan program, would almost certainly keep it going to test some of those zones. So yeah, I'm quite sure we'll expand the program. At some point, you have to take a break to sort of regroup, particularly look and understand the structure. And so we'll take a break at some point to do that sort of brainstorming and then go back for a third phase. But yes, with certainly good assets would see this program expanded probably quite readily. But you know, they are complex, as I say. I mean, the fact that Crystal, our geologist logging the core, said, you know, there's 5 phases of veining and events that she sees in that one large vein. So, and this is good. I mean, I know sometimes when I talk about it being complex, that may scare shareholders, but it's good because, you know, every event, every veining event, every brecciation event has the opportunity to bring in more gold. So yes, complexity of the structure, you know, it sucks to be the geologist logging the core, but for you and I, it's a good indication that that this is a long-lived and active system, and hence the opportunity both for grade and scale.
I know you haven't even finished drilling the hole; it's still ongoing. But do you have a sense of how things are coming along in terms of logging and sampling and getting ready to start shipping these things to the lab?
I know Christine sent a fairly big batch. I forget whether it was 150 or 250 samples, but a batch went out to the lab last night or this morning. So, you know, they're moving as quickly as they can. And I mean, right now they're going through kind of a dead zone report, just the sediments before we get down into the interesting pocket. So that kind of speeds up the logging a little bit. But once you start getting near the zone, as I say, it's complex. So the logger needs to take some time. But, you know, we got a good crew there right now. And, you know, the fact that they've got a batch off to the sample already, you know, even though we're only partway through the third hole, is you know, showing that they're keen and doing the best they can to get these samples to the lab as quickly as possible.
And I guess it's safe to assume you're going to be hounding the lab a little bit and twisting their arm to get this stuff turned around as fast as they can.
Oh yeah, as always.
Okay, well, I think that covers everything. I mean, obviously we can update again once some of this stuff starts coming back. But I mean, it looks really impressive. I mean, it's great. It's great core porn. I mean, it's classic epithermal and low sulfidation textures, great breccia. But it was really nice to see the increase in size. I mean, you describe it as a 9-meter vein, but you know, it's worth noting that there's actually like another 10 meters of really nice looking stockwork that you're not even counting as being part of that vein.
Yeah, that's correct.
It's quite a large zone. It's quite impressive looking. Thanks for jumping on here with me. I mean, we kind of get this organized pretty quickly after the news came out this morning. I will get this put together as fast as I can and get it out to subscribers. Everybody else will have to wait a while for it, but my subscribers will see it quickly. Congratulations to you guys. I mean, I know this has never been a simple project. It's, you know, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I mean, I love seeing companies literally look for new things. Very few companies actually do that. They all pay lip service, but they're all, you know, the vast majority of companies are going back to look at stuff that's been looked at 20 times before. You know, this is a brand new discovery. No one knew this existed before Northern Shield came along. It's not a simple system, but it looks like you guys are making great progress in unlocking the potential of this new low sulfidation epithermal discovery. I mean, it's great work, you guys. Yeah,
no, thanks very much. And it's just, you know, a classic example of being very methodical exploration, you know, model driven. And I wouldn't say it's quite panned out exactly as we predicted each phase, but it's working out for us. Every phase has come back with success, and long may it continue.
Yeah, I mean, every time you guys have gone, when you come back, it looks better, and that's as much as you can hope for at this stage of the exploration. I mean, that's kind of the sign of a good discovery, is that every time you do an exploration phase, it looks better rather than worse.
Yeah.
Okay, this has probably gone a bit long, so I'll leave it here for now. Thanks, Ian, for coming on. Again, Northern Shield Resources, NRN on the venture. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for dropping by to watch, and you know, keep your eyes peeled and watch your inbox, because there'll be more Zoom interviews from HRA with the other companies you follow. Thanks very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.